one. Guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We have David Kreiger from SalesRoads. We had David on the podcast almost 3 years ago. It's been a few years. Tons of things have happened. My guess. He's built over 500 SDR teams, generated more than 100,000 sales opportunities, and started the whole thing with $500 and a mission to employ military spouses. David Kreiger is the founder of SalesRoads. After nearly 20 years in the trenches of outbound sales, he has a perspective on pipeline quality that most people in this market simply don't have. So this one's going to get tactical. David, in 30 seconds, who are you, what do you do, and why should anybody stay on for the next hour to hear what you have to say?
Yeah, Shane, well, great to see you. Thanks for having me back on, and excited to dig into this with you. Yeah, I mean, your intro kind of said it all. Thanks for that. We've been building SDR teams for the past 20 years, well before the term SDR was even a term, right? It's been an amazing ride running SalesRoads, thinking through all the different things that change in this market, but a lot of the fundamentals still stay the same. And I know we're going to dig into that. And a big thing is that phone call. That when I first started SalesRoads, everyone's like, "Why are you doing this? Cold calling is dead." And here we are 20 years ago, and the industry is bigger than ever, right? So excited to dig into it with you, Shane.
Awesome. So you pitch a lot of companies right now. I'm in my third build now. So I built sales driven, then I went off into a startup. I used the skills from an agency in the startup, and now use the problems that I found in a startup to build a software company that I want to take forward and help agencies now. You built a long time ago. You pitched SalesRoads at, if I'm right, Wharton's business plan competition.
That's right. You've done your research. You dug that up from the old archives, right?
With $500 in your pocket and an idea to build a remote sales company staffed by military spouses. Wow, what made you believe that model could actually work?
Yeah, so really the impetus was a few different things. First, I was going back to business school with the goal of not getting a real job and starting my own company. So I was searching for an idea, and I had, prior to going back to business school, been part of an internet startup back in the 99, late 90s era, and had an amazing experience, hired by the VP of sales as an early 16th employee there. And he asked me to build the whole inside sales team. And I had no clue even what an inside sales team was. I bought cold calling for dummies. Like, how do I build this thing? But it was awesome. And that's how we built all of the pipeline at that organization, was through our inside sales team. And we had an amazing ride with that. And I just loved the whole process of building a team, building a sales team, and helping to generate, go-to-market motions. And so I was thinking about what to do. And at the same time, I was reading about the virtual model of call centers. So back then, JetBlue had started hiring moms working from home to answer calls. There were some early companies called LiveOps who were doing inbound call center work from home. And I was like, this could apply to outbound. And my initial thought was, especially in sales, it is a metrics-driven business, so you don't really need to have people there to know what they're doing. There's some arguments that we could dig into for culture and things like that, but you didn't need to have them under your thumb to know that they were doing work. And at the end of the day, sales is about creating great processes, creating great training, but having great people. And so back then I was like, why not hire people anywhere in the world? And so some of my friends, I was talking about the idea, they had come back from the military, and they had these amazing spouses who had trouble finding jobs because they're always moving from base to base internationally and things like that. So the original concept was like, let's hire these amazing spouses and have them work from home as inside sales reps. So that was the genesis of the organization. We got third place in the business plan competition. I think 1 and 2 never even launched as a real operating business. And here we are 20 years later. And it's been an amazing ride.
Oh my God. So let's just show the trajectory for those that don't know. So from home base USA to 3X Inc. 5000, like when I lived in New Jersey, I always used to watch these companies made this, you read the magazine, it made this, and you're one of those guys who's actually living it. So you went from that original idea to 3 appearances on the Inc. 5000 and 500 plus SDR teams built. Walk me through the moment the business stopped being a scrappy startup and started feeling like a real company.
Yeah, so we got traction very early on. So I'm gonna answer that in a few different ways. So we did make a pivot a few months in from the military spouse model because even though we were all branded around military spouses, we had all these amazing salespeople that were wanting to work from home for a reputable company, and we were turning them away. Why are we turning away great salespeople? So we rethought that a little bit. And I'd say for the first few years, though, we still were, and I still think we kind of are, you always should be somewhat of a scrappy startup, but from a mentality perspective. But we were definitely a scrappy startup where everyone was kind of doing everything. I had my fingers in everything. And I'll be honest, I hired a coach to give me perspective, to help me organize the company, really refine my org chart with clear accountabilities for every single person, accountabilities underneath them, make sure we had dashboards, not just obviously we had sales dashboards for our folks, but for every level, for everything they're doing so that they know what winning looks like, what success looks like. And so it was really bringing in that outside coach who really helped me to level up. I am a solopreneur where I, didn't have a co-founder. I didn't really have any perspective or other ways of doing things. And so having that outside person tell me, David, what are you doing? Like you're all over the place here. We got to organize you, and that really was amazing for me and for the business.
What do you think so for me, I've gone through a few stages. My first business is my co-founder. I thought that was the best asset. It ended up being one of my ended up being my demise. But now in a new company, building a startup from scratch, my most valuable hire has been an admin, just an assistant to get things started for me. Yeah. For you, what do you think as companies are building, whether you want to build a one-man band, you want to build this YC Combinator, a one-man band $1 trillion company, or you want to build a very, very big company, a people-driven company, what do you think is the most important first hire for a solopreneur when they are building a business today?
So I think it's different for everyone. You have to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and that other person has to be your yin to your yang, right? And has to complement you and be able to love those types of things that you might not be as good at. And so I find, and also thinks a little differently than you. So you have some perspective, you have a little bit of a different way of looking things, especially if you don't have a co-founder, you need to be challenged. You need somebody who can look at things in a different way. Now, that for me has been critical, but it can also just run the gamut. I totally understand at a certain stage having an admin when you're just trying to multiply and get more leverage out of what you're doing, and you're not ready to hire that person. That totally makes sense. But for me, it's really been that person who has a bit of a different skill set than me, thinks at things a little differently, and has been able to challenge me and complement me along the way.
I see that, and it's very interesting. A lot of the bigger software firms we saw in the past couple of years, they kind of migrated together. There was a lot of M&A in the space, and you've obviously just done it yourself. You've acquired VSA Prospecting. I think it was January 2025. So you and Valerie are both Wharton grads. You both built amazing lead gen companies over decades. So what made you decide to buy and as an agency rather than competing?
Yeah, so Valerie and I have known each other since I started the company. So we actually met at a Wharton networking event in Philadelphia when I was still a student, and we realized we were building something similar. And so we've kept in touch over the last 20 years, really trying to help each other. As agency owners, you run into very similar things. You have different types of processes that you need help on, and why always invent everything internally yourself when you can lean on other people and learn from them. And so Valerie and I had a great relationship in that way, where there, from time to time, we would compete for business, and obviously we would do that vigorously, as we would with any competitor. But we also found that we really helped each other through the years. And so Valerie got to a point where she was ready to step down, that she wanted to spend a bit more time with her grandkids. And
Yep.
so she actually approached me and said, would this make sense? And I've looked at these types of things a lot. And I do think as agencies, with any organization, combining two companies always is more difficult and challenging than you think it's going to be. But the most important thing is to try to make sure that you have some cultural fits, because you can't force two things, and we're a people business, two sets of people together if they don't gel. Otherwise, it's going to be like a heart transplant, where you have the wrong blood type. So, and if the body will just reject it. And
Yep.
again, as a people business, the time of the people within the business is the most valuable asset, and these things take time. So, I thought about it a lot, and we really did look at her team and what made sense, and the clients, and where there was a fit. And though things are never obviously exactly the same, it made sense. So even though we've looked at these types of things from both sides over the years, and consistently I've said no to them, this one made sense.
Wow. So do you see it as like how when you're looking at acquiring companies, I'm actually in the same space. In one of my so RevIntel is one thing, and I'm very interested in the M&A space. When I got my severance from Mega and I left it, the first piece of advice it was go into M&A and get studying on that, because buying and selling companies and those capital events are really interesting, and just knowing how to buy a company is very interesting. You are considered one of the, I've done a ton of research over the past 7 months. You are considered, David, one of the biggest agencies, sales appointment setting agencies in America right now. Now with VSA, you guys have obviously stepped it up a notch. Do you think you would consider taking on more of the industry and like having complete control over the market?
Uh, no. So is the short answer. We've even been approached since, it's been about a year and a half, for a few different both mergers or acquisitions, and I've gone down the road a bit on them,
Yeah.
but I'm very picky about it, because I think you really need to make sure that 1 + 1 = 3, because otherwise, if it's just 1 + 1 = 2, it sometimes can end up being 1 + 1 = 1.5, because you start
Yeah.
having complexity. You got to put everyone on the same tech stack, which is not always so easy. There can be different pricing things going on. So it's not always so easy. And you have to then also look, does it just make sense to sell more, right? As an agency, and hire
Hmm.
another sales rep, or invest a little bit more in marketing. So you have to really take a look and see whether it really makes sense and is going to make the company better.
Hmm.
And in the agency world, that's not always the case. And you're
Yeah.
just kind of merging two things together, and sometimes it's a step back.
Makes sense. So let's look at it from an operator side and what 500 SDR teams reveal. You've built more SDR teams than almost anyone alive. When you look across all of them, what is the pattern that separates the teams that build real pipeline from, the ones that just create a lot of activity?
Yeah. So I think it's first really making sure you spend time up front. I know that there are organizations out there, there's agencies even out there that will be like, okay, we'll have a kickoff meeting and we're going to launch tomorrow, right? And they just it means it's like cookie cutter. They're going to put it into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, spit out some sequences, spit out some
Yeah.
call approaches, do a quick once over with the SDRs, maybe not even do role play. And so you really gotta spend some time up front, because you've you got to think through what is it that is special about this organization, that is special to each of the different buyer personas you're going to be thinking about, that is going to cut through the clutter. And we all know there is a lot of clutter out there. So we do spend a lot of time up front thinking through that. And it's almost like a mini consulting project, to be honest. And we look at things. We obviously look at things we've done that have worked within SalesRoads. We try to apply best practices, but we also want to really look. Every company is unique in the way that they're both targeting. So I think it's really thinking through that. Then the other part of that is not going too broad. I mean, you've really got to think through who is your ICP and and make sure that is even targeted enough. And a lot of companies come to us, they haven't done that work. They haven't thought through who are their best customers, who are their most profitable customers. And the beautiful thing about Outbound is you can be very targeted, right? And so you've got to lean into it, because it is hard. It's hard to get conversations. It's hard to convert. So you've got to lean into one of the beauties of what we do, which is you can be, especially with the tools that are out there now, can be so targeted in your outreach, both in the types of companies, the personas, and then your understanding based upon the footprint of that company and that those specific people, what might be making them tick. So skipping that step is super challenging. And then lastly, or no, two last parts is, one, I think a lot of people think that if you just put an SDR out there, give them some scripting, maybe got these first two parts right, and give them leads and let them go, they're going to figure it out and they're going to make it work. And it just is not a set it and forget it. You've got to, even with experienced SDRs, you got to spend some time going over the nuances of that program. You got to role play. You got to continue. Like maybe they're going to hit it for a week or two, and then something happens and they get sloppy, or they got worst case scenario, they got an appointment doing something that wasn't quite the right messaging, and all of a sudden they're like, that's the messaging, right? So you manage the SDRs and make sure you're making sure they're doing what needs to be done, you're keeping them motivated. And then lastly, where it all started with me, is you just got to have great people. This doesn't work without really good people who know how to engage in an empathetic way, who really can ask good questions, who can listen in the right way, who don't come off as pushy in a cold call. And that's friggin' hard. So that you got to find the right people.
It's definitely hard. And what do you think makes a great employee today? So I have watched so much change, and I'm 40 years old this year. And I've watched a fair bit of change from 2014 up until now, where I used to have a Mytel phone and I would actually be banging away and going, and I would be the guy doing $200 a day before noon. I was the guy that was able to figure it out. I was the guy who wanted to prove a point, until proving a point got very, let's say, draining energetically wise. And then it came to a place where money was the motivator, right? And you always think incentivizing your team becomes the money motivator, and until it became a point where the money motivator was coming from somebody so unrealistic that when you're putting together, and you'll know this, hey, we're going to hit $1 million in monthly recurring revenue, and we just started 3 months ago. And you're just like, guy, like, do you really believe the stuff that's coming out of your mouth? And then it comes down to purpose, and helping an employer, 22-year-old, 23, 24, even 30-year-old, understand true purpose and motivations from purpose and fulfillment, I think is it's not happening yet. Like they're not aware of those things. So how do you create a great employee? What are you driving with? Is it incentives? Is it getting to know them? Is it that you're remote? Do you have collective activities? Like what do you think is working to drive that true motivation, that company camaraderie in 2026?
Yeah, so I think it actually starts with the selection of the SDR. And so we actually don't hire young kids out of college. I, I do think that that can work for a few months, maybe a year or two, but most are wanting to then, first of all, get promoted into that AE, and that's kind of the motivation. We don't have that role, so we can't even offer that if they're not.
Yeah.
So then, but also we just have found that hiring a person who's later in their career, they first of all know what they're getting into because it's not, and they like it because that's the type of job that they're in. And so we do recruit for folks who are later in their career for some of those reasons. And so we have to sort of start from that. And so what we found is a few different things. One, obviously there's money motivations, and you want to make sure that you've got a good commission plan in place that is realistic, because otherwise it can be demotivational. Like if you throw out these numbers that somebody can't do, it's got to be within the realm of possibility for them. So that's kind of like table stakes. But what we've really invested hard into is our culture, and our community, and we're virtual. We've always been virtual. I think it's harder. I think, listen, most companies are kind of virtual at this point, but there was a point, and maybe there's pressure to go hybrid and all that type of stuff. I think that that's the worst. Just pick which one you are, and then you got to build a culture around it. Yeah. But otherwise, you've got some people who are in, and they feel, the remote people feel left out. The people who are in are like, well, I have to commute. Why don't they? Anyway. So we do a lot around our community with all the basic stuff, but it's important, the game days. We have such a vibrant Slack community where everyone is shouting each other out when they get appointments. For even if people share personal things, we have a water cooler channel, they shout out, and there's just a vibrancy where people have built really strong relationships amongst each other who they've never even met. And that just takes hiring the right people, having the right managers, reinforcing our core values day after day. We have core value shout outs where people get little prizes just for embodying part of their core values. Own the outcome is one of our core values, never stop learning. So other things, like that. And it's just a repeat, and it has to start from me. So I'm always doing that. We have town halls on a quarterly basis where we obviously give our sales awards, but we give our core value awards as well. And so, going through business school, when people talk about culture, that's the fluffy stuff, and I'd even run bullshit, right? But it's like. It really is super important. I think people stick around because they love the organization. They love the people that they work with. They don't hate their managers. That's also really important. People, I think we've all heard it. People don't leave companies, they leave managers. And I think that's super true. And so I think it's a lot of those different pieces that have to come together. And it's sort of like gardening. It's like you have to have that green thumb. You have to sort of just make all of those things work in order to create the culture that you want, which translates into a high-performing sales culture.
Wow. So let's say I'm a client and I'm watching this and I'm like, wow, Dave's got a big team. He could probably run so many campaigns. I want him to do one of my campaigns. So they ask you to build pipeline for them. You're in the call. You're now live. How do you give a client that confidence that what your team is generating is genuinely qualified and just not meetings on a calendar? And here's one. Have you ever heard this? We're doing a behavioral psychology piece around RevIntel and the adoption of the product and the software into their environments. And what we found is a lot of people don't adopt the platform because of the behaviors they have, the psychology around certain things that they do. And they might book a meeting with somebody and say, hey, and this has happened. Hey, I want to book a meeting with you. Oh, yeah, but I'm really busy this week. Hey, look, what do you got to lose? It'll be 30 minutes. Just jump on the call next week. I'll send you a calendar invite. All you got to do is show up. And then your rep or the rep hands off that meeting, then the client shows up to that call. And they've probably experienced this. And then they show up to the call. The rep comes onto the call and they're like, I don't even know why I'm on this call. The rep sounded really good. He was a nice guy. So I'm taking the call. Now what do you do, right? So how do you make sure that that level of quality control and assurance exists when, like I said, you're putting meetings on the qualified meetings on the calendar versus appointments on a calendar?
So first, it starts before we even make a sale with a client, because I think part of what leads to that behavior is what we touched on before, which is unrealistic expectations. And if an SDR needs to beg, borrow, and steal to get to their quota, because the quota is misset, you're already misaligned and going to start encouraging that type of behavior. So first, before we even sign a client, and we really spend a lot of time in the sales process figuring out and discussing what is doable from our end and what is needed from their end to make this work. I hear, at least from a lot of other agencies or people, when they talk to us, they're like, well, this agency, promised us 10 appointments a week, or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or they even have it on their website. I'm like, how do you know you can do 10 appointments a week when you don't even know what you're selling or who you're selling to, right?
Yeah. It's true.
So we spend a lot of time, and we have a lot of historical data we use. We have a calculator. We really want to make sure that that's aligned. And if it's not aligned, listen, you've been in this business. There is a lot of business in the hair. A lot. When you can do this well, there are a lot of companies want to work with you. And so we found it's much better to align up front, say, listen, for you to get an RI, you say you need 10 because this is your margin, things like that. We can't deliver 10. So we just, we don't see it. And so we'd rather have that conversation up front, because first of all, that client isn't going to get an RI, and that's what we're in the business of doing. They're going to churn, and that's really expensive for us. And going to your point, for the SDR, it's not fair, because now their quota is set at that 10, and there's no way they're going to make that 10 unless they throw appointments over the wall. So, so I think that first is the first thing, and a lot of companies and agencies can get that wrong. So you need to make sure that the SDRs can hit their quota by setting qualified appointments and not crap appointments. So we work really hard at that. And listen, sometimes it's not easy to always predict. And so we have like a little bit of a lab period at the beginning, and the SDRs, we make sure that they're taken care of as we try to figure out the exact numbers. And we also work with the client to align along the way. So there's that process. The other part of it is we just do not accept crap appointments, right? That's not what we're in the business in. And like what you said, it's worse than no appointment at all, because you're taking that AE's time. Sometimes if you're working with founder-led startups, right, that's even worse. You're taking that founder's time. And so that is not okay. So we obviously have QA where we can record calls, we can catch those things proactively. But if not, and we're getting that feedback, we need to get feedback. It is super important, as you know, and you're building a great business around it. Feedback from the client as to what are good appointments and what aren't. And if SDR is setting those that are not qualified, those are things that get written up for. So it is a really important thing, but that is also, we need to make sure that they can do good work and hit quota that is realistic by setting good appointments.
I think the most important catch I just heard there is the accountability piece. I have not heard any agency owner say, like, no, I'm sure they do, but the whole part about a disciplinary action around these are clients' times, and this is your money, the whole business's money. So it is a really, really bad dampener on like poor behaviors, right? Or just careless behaviors. So let's say I'm a CMO, I'm a chief marketing officer, I'm a VP of sales, I've just come into the role. I know that these guys, they're a great team, but I need some juice. I keep hearing this guy Shane talk about a bunch of stuff, and this guy David's got a real cool. He's got looks like he's got a real cool business. So when you take on that new client and you're looking at their existing sales process, this guy's got to figure it out over the next 6 months, right? You might be able to help him do it in one. And they're looking at their existing sales process for the first time. So what is the first thing you check that tells you where the leaks are?
Yeah. So this is something we also do in the our sales process, because it is a big gap. And if a client isn't ready for us and they don't have a buttoned up sales process, and we've seen it before,
Yep.
they're going to be wasting money. Go to market is expensive. It's an investment, both of money that you're investing in our resources, but also to make it work in their time and taking the appointments and meeting with us on a weekly basis. So we ask and we try to understand what their sales process is. And so, for instance, I'll give you an example. There's a company we just signed, super cool early stage startup, but they've been selling to referrals. Now, referrals is a different sales process than outbound and a lot easier to close, right? When you get referred through your network and things like that. So they basically would take those meetings and kind of just sell them, and there was no process. They didn't have a CRM. And I told them, we cannot work with you until you have, first of all, a CRM set up. You have mapped out a sales process. It doesn't have to be complicated. You do a discovery, you do a demo, you have a few different stages that you've built out, and you have figured out exactly how to approach them. And we can track it in your CRM. And we have a partner that we do work with who they can engage with and help them with that. But we won't take you on as a client until you have built that out, because it's going to be a mess if you don't do it before you start working with us. So they built it out. We actually launched last week, and it's already out of the gate has been awesome. So.
Wow, yeah, because you get these dreamers and they're like, yeah, I think I can get 30 meetings. Like, that's the standard. Okay, so what proof do you have? We have not been selling. So, but we know we can get 30 because our product is amazing. So, you've heard that a bunch of times before. So let's go to the thinker, okay? And we've got the phone working very well in a digital world. My opinion is there is so much noise. There is so much let's just stick with the word noise out there. You've got solutions. You've got all these influencers. You've got coaches. You've got this guy, that guy. It is so crowded to know what's actually good. And when you hear a real person call you on the phone and they are authentic, they're a SalesRoads SDR and they have a personality, they have a business acumen, and they call you, it obviously changes the world, right? And then an email is nowhere near as close to a good phone call. A LinkedIn message is nowhere near as good as a good phone call. But you know it yourself. It's the phone is the least crowded channel in lead generation right now. And we hear this noise. Most people think cold calling is dead. Far from it. That's my reason for why I believe they're wrong. What's your opinion for believing that they're wrong?
Well, I see day in and day out companies that are able to scale because of our methodology, which is based upon that phone. Obviously, we can leverage other channels, but to your point, there was maybe a period where email broke through a bit. You can still do email well, it just is more challenging. You have to really stay ahead of it. There's no reason not to use it as a complementary factor, but we see day in and day out companies that are scaling, raising new rounds, exiting, going public, all through the outbound channel. And so it does work. You do need to make sure a number of different things. You got to make sure that you do have enough margin in what you're selling. Or listen, if you are still in that mindset of just buying logos, but you need to know what the numbers are and what it is that you're gunning towards, and make sure that the numbers work, because they don't always work. But for those companies that it works, the numbers work. It is the most predictable way of generating revenue. And then going back to my earlier point, lean on targeting, because not all clients are created equal, right? And sometimes it's just a handful of specific clients that have a certain type of makeup that you can service really well, that really have specific pain points that you can solve, and you can try to market to them. And listen, there's ways through LinkedIn to be more targeted and whatnot, but it's not nearly as targeted as saying, okay, this is the company I want to sign. These are the 10 people that are in the buying committee at that company, and I'm going to go reach out to each and every one of them. So
Look, it makes sense. It makes sense. And I think this is where we lead to. One thing I've seen is the phone calls lead to the most conversations. It is a fact, right? Whether the percentage rates or what your pickup rates are, that's a different nuance that we could talk about later. But you've talked about conversations going down over 15 years, but success rates going up. So how are you actually using AI inside SalesRoads right now? And where do you draw the line on what stays human?
So where we use AI in sales right now and has been phenomenal is on the back end sales ops motions. So the lead targeting, the lead scrubbing, the reporting analysis. If you're not using AI for those types of things, I mean, I don't know what you're doing. So I'll break down just a few examples. One for lead lists, every prospect list that we are creating on the company level first. There, we use the regular selects and things like that with the number. We have a number of different databases to pull it, but then we are spinning up an AI agent to make sure that they are the right types of companies based upon the ICP that has been specified. Because before, either you had to have somebody manually going through and looking at the websites and making sure they're the right type of company, or worse, which is usually what would happen if the SDR would be looking at the company, make sure it's the right thing.
Yeah.
There should be no reason why you don't have those vetted by looking through the whole website and making sure it's the right company that you want to target. Now, also as part of that, there are some things where there are no selects. So for instance, a good example is if you're using a Zoom Info or any of the other things to try to pull an MSP, right? There's no NASIC code, or it's under IT services or something like that. So it's very hard to get specific, right? So now you can get as specific as you want with an AI agent. You pull a list of the broader, and you can get exactly the type of company that has the services that you're looking to target. So AI is super important for that. Obviously, also on the prospect side, or the making sure that it's all cross-checking with their LinkedIn, their social footprint. Is this the person at that company? Are they still there? Have they said anything about what you're talking about? Surfacing any of those types of things, AI is super critical for. Then on the reporting side, I mean, it's amazing. And you can now type in to certain platforms, give me all the objections that this title gave me, and what were some of the responses, right? I mean, the way you can go through call transcripts through data now is just phenomenal, where you just had to before do a lot of heavy listening, and it still was hard. You had to remember what you had heard on the 50th call, right? So so we found that AI is super powerful for that. For outbound, for consumer touches, we outbound cold AI calls is technically illegal still, right? And so we don't go near that for our clients. I know some people are kind of trying to go in the gray area, but we don't want to do anything that is illegal. And I haven't yet seen the success numbers on it. I do think, listen, that AI is getting really good, and if it were legal, we would be experimenting a lot with it. But it's not a methodology. So we do use it in emailing. We can customize emails, obviously, with AI. It takes a lot of prompting to get it right, but you can do it, and we definitely saw a lift when we were doing it early on for the first few years. Now everyone's doing it. It becomes a little bit harder. But those are some of the places we have spun up an inbound follow-up AI program that's been very successful for a client. So that was a good use case for a very simple qualification call. So those are a few things that we've used, but really where we've seen tremendous efficiencies and productivity gains and outcome gains is through sales ops leveraging AI.
So two questions then, and then we'll wrap it up. So what do you think about companies they exist right now and they want to adopt AI? So what they do is they will go buy, let's say you're a company of 100 people, they go buy 100 ChatGPT licenses for $20. And now they think we're AI enabled. We're going to do so much stuff, right? But what they fail to realize is that whether it's ChatGPT, if you even add 5 tools, you're adding a 5 to 10% buffer on increased productivity. However, if you change that model, which is what we've learned to build RevIntel on, is a different model, which is to redesign the entire workflow. And when you redesign the entire workflow, you effectively remove all this. You know how you have I call them informants. So you have the CEO, you have your rep, and then you have your middle managers, which are the snitches, right? And the informants of everybody. They tell everybody what's happening. And this removes that and puts a repository of, let's say, all of SalesRoads activity, the data, the contact records, the deals. It all sits here. And then AI agents are supposed to operate around that and then pick in here if something needs changed, if a campaign needs optimized, if it's not performing. AI then goes into the system and makes those changes. And David sits at top and just says, approve. The chief operations officer says, approve. There's no more middle manager. And then you cut out a layer of, let's say, a couple of $1 million, and AI and agentic AI then runs it. That's become my superpower, knowing that I can build a much larger company with that much power if I remove that middle manager concept that I thought to be true for so many years. You, as a CEO of an agency now, you are now into AI. You've seen everything that's happened over the past few decades. What is your superpower? If I'm an agency owner looking at David and say, I want to be like him in the next however many years, what would you recommend a good superpower to adopt, or something that's worked for you by using and leveraging AI in today's world? What has really, really made a difference for you specifically? Not the team, not the business, for David specifically.
Yeah, so I think the thing that I found, and I actually think it can go super wrong when you use it in the wrong way.
Hmm.
And I actually think as a society we run the risk of becoming stupider if we do it the wrong way, is leveraging AI as my brainstorming partner. And what I found is I'm the type of person who likes to talk things out and just think
Hmm.
things through.
Yeah.
And AI has been great for that. Obviously, I've had to prompt it and make sure it challenges me and is always like finding the things that could be wrong in my argument. And that's been super helpful for me to sort of brainstorm things with AI and try to
Hmm.
think through different ideas, different things I'm thinking about rolling out. And so that's one of the things that I've had. I've actually seen outside of my company, I think within my company, where they will actually just sort of outsource their thinking to AI. In that case, doing
Not
what
the
you're
best.
doing, is a no-brainer, right? Because then why not just have an AI do all this type of stuff,
Hmm.
right? But for me, that's been one of the things that I have found has been super helpful for me is being a thinking partner, and that's helped me as I've been thinking through different ideas through the past few years.
Amazing. So just for context too, that you know how you got that 5%, 5 to 10% productivity gain? With the other model, it goes to 49%.
Yeah,
This is
it's really
from
interesting.
YC. It's really interesting, right? So, last question. If I'm a revenue leader listening to this and could only change one thing about my outbound pipeline strategy tomorrow, what should it be? Call SalesRoads.
Well, yeah, maybe. I think listen. That's not a one size fits all type of program. Um, because there's you gotta gotta know. Here's the thing, and maybe this answers the question. Um, is I think outbound, a lot of companies, even the largest companies, think that it's and I've mentioned this a little bit before, think it's an autopilot type of thing, and it just should be working. It is one of those things that needs to have constant focus. It's one of those things that changes faster than most anything, can have the highest turnover than any other department. And so it is just not a type of thing that where you set it, you forget it. You might get lucky and get the Shanes of the world. You said you were sort of an SDR and you just made stuff happen and whatnot. But more often than not, it needs so much care and attention for it to work. And more often than not, when people say that it doesn't work, it's because they haven't focused and spent enough time on it. And you need to have time to make this thing work. And if it does, it's going to pay back in spades.
Man, I think that's a great way to wrap up the podcast. Guys and girls, that's it. David, any last words?
No, well, appreciate you, Shane, having me back on. Always good to see you. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast.
No problem, Dave. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this episode and staying here the whole way through. If you like what you saw, click subscribe. It'll take you 2 seconds. It helps me reach amazing guests and deliver valuable content for you. And if you ever want to find out what we do as a business, go to www.gorevintel.com, and that is the place where we help you make decisions that are backed by intelligence, and it's for founder CEOs. That's it for me for now. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.